Copy that.
O, trochu dlhší to bylo, pojďme.
So Bob and Doug, along with the launch teams and all of the rest of America, hoping the rain clears up here. But as far as comms checks go, everything sounded pretty normal, pretty nominal there. So we're just waiting on the weather to clear up. But again, there's a live look at Launch Complex 39A, the site of 82 space shuttle missions where they began. And of course, Apollo, the first mission to the moon, Apollo 11 lifted off from 39A. And Leland, you were just 5 years old when that happened. Take us back there.
Marie and Lauren, I was 5, and I was the antenna engineer during the broadcast. I was the kid standing behind the black and white Sylvania television holding the rabbit ears, and my dad said, move to the left, move to the right. And I was trying to look around the television to see what was going on, but they said, no, don't move, stay there. So I never actually saw the actual landing on the moon, Neil and Buzz walking on the moon. And the next day, all my friends in my community were like, yeah, you want to be an astronaut? We just had this momentous thing. I said, no. I didn't see it. I want to be Arthur Ashe, because Arthur Ashe trained 5 blocks down the street from where I grew up. And my dad talked about his excellence, his perseverance, his athleticism. And so it wasn't until I got to NASA, working as an engineer at NASA Langley, that a friend of mine said, you'd be a great astronaut. And I just laughed at him. And I didn't fill the application out, but another friend of mine got in, Charlie Camarda. And I said, if he can become an astronaut, I can become one. So I applied the next year and I got in the 1998 class. And I think about this, again, storied legacy, Pad 39A. I was there in 2008 and 2009, Space Shuttle Atlantis, the last one that came in with Doug and the rest of the crew. And it's just an amazing time to see this new era with Lauren, with your SpaceX Crew Dragon about to take off.
I never heard that story.
I've got a million stories. A million stories.
Wow. It's so cool that, you do have a lot of these kids that are watching today who have never seen a flight, a human space flight.
Street from where I grew up. And my dad talked about his excellence, his perseverance, his athleticism. And so it wasn't until I got to NASA, working as an engineer at NASA Langley, that a friend of mine said, you'd be a great astronaut. And I just laughed at him. And I didn't fill the application out, but another friend of mine got
And as Dan mentioned, this is a standard procedure to exit the vehicle as well. We did scrub today, but this is not an emergency state. This is standard procedure.
Sit v kategorii trendies.
Marie, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by one of NASA's record-setting astronauts and a recent resident aboard the space station, Christina Cook. Christina, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you today.
Christina, we're coming up on 20 years of continuous human presence on the International Space Station, and you were one of those humans. What's it like to see a new milestone like this launch unfold after so much history already?
You're right, so much history indeed, and it's just been great to watch it all unfold. I think for me, the most exciting thing is how NASA is not only innovating in what we do, exploring the universe, pushing the boundaries, getting knowledge on the space station, bringing it back to Earth for benefits here, but in how we do it. We're innovating in the implementation of those goals and of our mission. And what that means is that bringing in the private sector, bringing in a commercial space economy for low Earth orbit means space is going to be more accessible and more innovative. And it's just an awesome new era of history to be able to witness.
You hold the record for the longest single stay by a female astronaut in space. What's it like living aboard for so long?
Well, it is truly a privilege every single day. I have to say it's a beautiful thing to look down on the earth and to be able to kind of contribute to a space program that you yourself have held in such high regard your entire life. I would say that the biggest challenge going into sort of those longer times is remaining vigilant. The engineers make it so easy to live on board the space station. Sometimes you forget you're actually surrounded by such a hostile environment. So remaining vigilant both day to day to have that appreciation that you wake up with every day, and then also being vigilant, knowing that things could take a turn for the worse at any time, and you have to be ready to react to that. So it's a great privilege, but it also comes with great responsibility.
You came to NASA after the days of the shuttle program and you flew on the Russian Soyuz. What does it mean to have this private capability to fly astronauts to the station?
Well, I think it's just a great innovation in terms of our partnerships. You know, when we started out, it was individual countries pursuing space exploration. We brought in the international aspect of it, and now we're really folding in that commercial aspect, bringing the innovation of all of our American industrial power and recognizing that the more partnerships we have, the more accessible, the more innovative space exploration can be. So it's an awesome time, and it brings with it so much more capability into the program as well. So it's not only how we're doing it, but it's what it brings.
We're looking forward to having this transportation from private companies. How does it help you do your job in space?
You know, I think one concept that we have in NASA for safety and to mitigate risk is called dissimilar redundancy. And here now we're bringing up a whole second way of getting crew to the International Space Station and getting cargo, last minute cargo. So we're increasing how much science we can do on board the space station by twofold. We're increasing how we can, you know, our options for getting items up, stowage items, supplies, provisions, science experiments. So we're really just banking on the extra redundancy to make the program that much more robust.
We're watching Bob and Doug go through the final phases of preparing for this launch. What's going through your mind so close to liftoff?
Oh, it is such a great day indeed. You know, it's interesting because I think it's not so much what is going through your mind, but what's not going through your mind. You know, you're not thinking about all the things could go wrong. You're thinking about enabling success by doing what you've been trained to do. One of the sayings we have is that on launch day, astronauts are sometimes the most calm people in the room. And I found that to be true on my launch day too. I think it's kind of this career culmination of everything you've learned, everything you've dreamed of, and you know that it's coming together in that day and that you're going to finally do what you're prepared to do, execute the mission, and it just really brings a sense of calm and readiness.
NASA astronaut Christina Cook, always an honor to hear from you.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Well, once Bob and Doug arrive at the station, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy will be ready to welcome them on board. So in anticipation of their launch, he had this message for them.
Hello, everyone. I'm astronaut Chris Cassidy, commander of Expedition 63 on board the International Space Station, flying 250 miles above the Earth. Like you, I'm excited about today's launch and the possibilities it will bring to America and to the world. But also, I'm very excited that two close friends will be arriving and joining the crew. I had the privilege of flying with Doug Hurley on both of our first shuttle missions back in 2009. Together, we came to the International Space Station and helped construct the amazing facility that it is today. Although this will be my first mission with Bob, it was my honor to follow him as the chief of the office when he left back in 2015 to begin training for this amazing mission. Personally, I've been very fortunate to fly in two different spacecraft. Launching from America on the shuttle, and most recently launching from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz. But I can't tell you how exciting it is to know that we're once again launching Americans from the coast of Florida. And finally, here's a story I'd like to share with you. Back in 1981, John Young and Bob Crippen launched on Space Shuttle Columbia, the very first space shuttle flight, marking the last time we flew Americans on a brand new vehicle. With them, they flew an American flag, representing American technical prowess.
Some space.
30 years later, that same flag was flown
You.
And there again is a live look at Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we are T-minus 1 hour, 41 minutes, 58 seconds and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying Crew Dragon with astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley strapped inside. We can see some raindrops on the screen there. It looks like rain coming down at the pad, but we're still monitoring weather, and it sounds like there's going to be another decision point before they start fueling the Falcon 9 rocket, which is scheduled to happen at about T-minus 35 minutes. So we just heard a little bit about where they're headed. If the weather cooperates today, to the International Space Station. Leland, you've been there twice, and I know just from what you've told us, it's this Leviathan in space and the site of so much important work and partnerships happening.
Right. Chris Cassidy is up there floating in the Columbus laboratory that I installed, or our team of us installed on STS-122. And I think about, using this robotic arm that was made in Canada. The European Space Agency built the Columbus laboratory, and my job was to use that arm and attach it to the International Space Station. And as it was getting closer and closer, the motion just stopped. And I'm like, what is going on? And there are 4 ready-to-latch indicators that have a very slight spring force that I was moving so slowly with the hand controller, the translational hand controller, that spring force stalled out the motion. And Peggy Whitson was behind me, and she said, Leland, there's some commentary. Weather update, I think.
Go ahead, sir. Hey, Doug. We're still waiting for a weather update expected at 18 Zulu. Therefore, the next assessment will be closer to the propellant load time. We are currently no-go in launch weather, but we are showing an expected clear of 1830 Zulu.
Okay, copy all. Thanks for the update.
So we just heard if they were to launch right now, the weather would be no-go. However, it sounds like there may be an opportunity if the weather clears, as it sounds like they expect it may. So again, we're gonna keep listening as we continue talking. If we start to hear any kind of chatter, especially if it's about the weather, we're gonna do our best to quiet down so that we don't step on that and everyone can hear it along with us. But Leland, you were just talking about the work on station, and Peggy Whitson was getting ready to tell you something.
Well, so the Columbus laboratory is stalled out. It's about to be attached, and there were 10,000 people waiting. Their job security depended on me installing this thing properly.
Right.
And Peggy said, Leland, push just a little bit harder on the hand controller, and all 4 ready-to-latch indicators went green. And I was like, yes! And that was our primary mission objective. But that paled in comparison to what happened next. Peggy invited us over to dinner in the Russian segment, and we had this meal with people from all over the world, Russian, German, French, African American, Asian American. This diversity that we talked about earlier, were up there breaking bread at 17,500 miles per hour while listening to Sade's Smooth Operator.
What?
It blew my mind. It was Smooth Operator, right?
What an appropriate song for this job too, right?
Wow, does she know? She knows now.
Yeah. And Dan Tani actually changed the song from Smooth Operator to Arm Operator. So you see Arm Operator.
Love it. Love it. And Leland, you actually, we were in another taped segment when you got a text from Drew Foystel. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, Drew Foystel, his good friend, just sent me a text saying that the families say hello to all who are watching and thank the nation and the world for their support and interest. And Chris Ferguson just actually sent me a text. He was the commander on STS-135 and one of my classmates from the 1998 class, and he says, way to go, Godspeed on Crew Dragon.
That's awesome. It's great to hear those words of support. Thank you guys for watching and everybody following along at home. I mean, the COVID-19 situation has been just a tough time for people stuck inside, homeschooling their kids, still trying to do their jobs, and so it's really cool to be able to watch this happening. And we see the pad closeout team It looks like they are getting ready, or they've left the white room and they've already come down the crew access arm, so they are getting ready to leave the pad now. And we are going to go now to the Operations and Support Building 2, where Daryl Nail is standing by with NASA's Chief of Staff to talk to us a little bit about some of NASA's ambitions beyond the International Space Station and its work with the Commercial Crew Program. Daryl?
Yeah, that's right. We're here in the mission briefing room at the top of Operations and Support Building here, where there's a lot of important people that are gathering to watch the launch here. And one of those people, it's not me, by the way, one of those people that is important is Gabe Sherman, NASA's Chief of Staff. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Daryl.
You got kind of the insight of what's coming down the pike here at NASA. So, of course, today is Commercial Crew, and we're focused on that and seeding the commercial market. But what's off in the horizon for NASA?
Well, I'll just tell you, it's an incredibly exciting time to be at NASA, and you know this. I mean, you're here every day. But whenever you think about what we're doing with Commercial Crew, in the horizon in July, we're launching Mars Perseverance, which is just going to be an incredible thing for us. You look at the end of this year, SLS, the largest rocket in the world, is going through testing right now, going through green run testing, and we're hoping maybe by the end of the year we can even get it right out here to the Cape, which would be just an incredible achievement for our team. So there is no shortage of things to be excited about at NASA right now.
And it feels like everything is really starting to happen here recently with everything that you just mentioned. And if we get that first Artemis launch, that could be right around the corner as well.
Oh man, we're looking at I think late 2021 is what we're looking for, and so you think about SLS potentially moving from the green run to the Cape. You've got Orion finishing up its last little bit of testing. It moved from Plumbrook earlier this year, our station up there in Ohio, down to KSC. So we're looking at checking it out throughout next year, and hopefully we'll have the first integrated flight of SLS and Orion at the end of 2021, and I'm telling you that is going to be a moment.
That will be exciting.
Yeah.
And there will be a thunderous boom right here at the
Yes.
Kennedy Space Center. So with Mars as the end goal, how does all of this get to that end point?
You bet. No, and I think that's what's so important about the Artemis program, right? Our long-term vision is to get to Mars, but when you think about Artemis, everything that we're doing at the moon is helping us learn, prove out capabilities and technologies, work through the right mission durations, understand how we utilize the resources of the moon potentially to go further onto Mars. So the technology, the science, the exploration, architecture that we're putting together, each and every piece of it is helping us learn a little bit more, prove out a little bit more. And you're taking what you've learned and you're moving it forward to the next mission. But I think it's really about the business case. If you think about what Commercial Crew is, it's NASA moving from owning and operating hardware to buying a service, right? And if you remember, just a few weeks ago, we awarded 3 contracts on the human landing system to commercial companies. And so we're hoping that we move to a day where we're actually buying a service to get our astronauts back and forth to the moon. So actually enabling the commercial market to go from low Earth orbit all the way out to lunar orbit. And so Commercial Crew is a great proving ground for that. Helps us prove out that business case, build those partnerships, and then we get a feed forward to the moon. So it means a lot. This means a lot as we move out.
And it's really exciting when you talk about the Commercial Crew, the commercial aspect going to the moon. Right. And those partners. They're going to be studying those landers to see if they are viable for NASA?
Yeah, working through a tremendous process with the commercial providers and NASA engineers, going through initial designs right now, looking at the capabilities that they've proposed, and then trying to make decisions on which landing system goes early in 2024, which landing systems are better prepared for sustainability out in the later 20s. And so that is going to be an ongoing process throughout this year and moving into next. So it's going to be really exciting to kind of see what comes out as, hey, this is the lander that's going to take the first woman and the next man to the moon in 2024.
Right, so different than the time of Apollo when we went to the moon. And that program ultimately came to an end. The idea here, though, is to try to create some sustainability. Talk about that.
Right, and sustainability, you can get to sustainability if you have reusability, right? And that's what we're seeing with Commercial Crew for sure. But whenever you think about our human landing system, you're looking at a system that we put out there at the moon once we get to sustainability, and it's going back and forth, taking multiple trips to the lunar surface, back up to Gateway, which you're familiar with, is kind of our smaller space station we're going to put in orbit around the moon. So we are building an architecture that is going to enable reusability at the moon. Apollo never had that. And so whenever you think about driving down cost and increasing access, reusability, sustainability are critical.
So you get to see everything from a very high level at NASA. What's it like for you personally, I'm curious, to be here at the Kennedy Space Center to watch a launch and to just see this amazing facility where all of this activity happens?
Yeah, I think sometimes people think since I work at NASA, I'm around this stuff all the time. I'm not, right? I don't get to come down here nearly as often as I'd like. So it's just as exciting for me as it is for anybody else in this room. When you think about all the hard work that our team has put in to get us to this day, to actually come down and be a part of it with them, it's just overwhelming and incredible. So we're just a little bit excited.
All right, Gabe Sherman, NASA's Chief of Staff. We appreciate you joining us today and enjoy the launch. I certainly know you will if we're able to get that one off. We're going to toss this back now to Hawthorne, California.
Joining us now is SpaceX's Lars Blackmore to discuss SpaceX's future ambitions to visit the moon and Mars. Thanks for joining us again today for a second round.
You're welcome.
Could you tell us just a little bit about your background and what you do here at SpaceX?
Yeah, well, I'm in charge of entry and landing for Starship, which is SpaceX's next rocket after Falcon 9. And before that, I worked for many years on the same thing for Falcon. So hopefully today you'll see another one of those landings on a drone ship.
Awesome. And speaking of that, what role does reusability play in getting people to the moon and Mars in the future?
Well, it's really all about making human spaceflight affordable. And what you want for that is a 100% reusable rocket. Now, Falcon is only partially reusable, but Starship is going to be 100% reusable. And we've actually already started working with NASA on using Starship to send astronauts to the surface of the moon for the first time since 1972. Not only that, Starship will be refuelable on orbit, and the combination of those two things will let us send people basically anywhere in the solar system with more payload for less money than I think people have really been contemplating. I think for the first time we can seriously talk about things like lunar bases, or what SpaceX cares about most, a self-sustaining civilization on Mars.
Right. So what you're saying is I will have an opportunity soon to get on board one of those spaceships.
I very much hope so. Yeah.
So speaking of reusability and landing, I know you mentioned Starship will be refuelable in orbit, but Falcon does come back and land back on Earth. What are the challenges with actually landing on the moon and landing on a planet like Mars?
Yeah, well, you can't land like a plane, because the moon and Mars either have no atmosphere or have a very thin atmosphere, and even if you could, there's no runway that someone's built for you. So that's one of the reasons that we do propulsive landing on Falcon, because we want to figure out how to do propulsive landing. That fundamental architecture works on basically any planet. If you have no atmosphere like the moon, you do a propulsive landing burn all the way. If you have a thick atmosphere like Earth, you let the atmosphere slow you down as you float down and do a short landing burn at the end. And for Mars, which has an atmosphere but a very thin one, you do something in between the two.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really difficult. And I'm sure there's been a lot of effort put into that. Can you tell us anything about what we're working on now to get us to a point where we can do a landing like that in such a harsh environment?
Yeah, so figuring out propulsive landing is really the key part of it. But what people may not realize is that every time we bring Falcon back, we do something called an entry burn. So just before we hit the atmosphere, we light the engines to slow the rocket down. That happens high up where the air is very thin. And it just so happens that the conditions there are very similar to what a Mars landing burn would look like. So even though it takes months to get to Mars, and you can only do it every 2 years when the planets line up, we effectively get to practice Mars propulsive landing every time we bring Falcon back, including, hopefully, today.
Wow. And as you mentioned, every time we bring Falcon back, we learn something new. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we learn after the vehicle has returned and we're able to check out the vehicle?
Yeah, so Jessica actually mentioned this earlier, that I talked about how cost is really one benefit of reusability, but reliability is the other benefit. I mean, imagine that you do all this planning to send a rocket up through the rigors of launch and re-entry, but you don't get to see the rocket afterwards. And what we would like to do with the reusability, what we've been able to do with Falcon 9, is see the rocket, inspect it, and because of that, we've been able to correlate our models pre-flight to what actually happens when you launch, re-enter, and land a rocket.
Right, instead of just guessing what happened to the vehicle after it's left.
Exactly.
That is amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us today for a second round. Hopefully the weather works with us today in a couple hours, actually. Let's throw it back to KSC with Marie.
All right, actually, we have Lauren here. Now, today's mission opens up the door to one day allowing the general public to be able to visit places like the moon and Mars. And as you've heard through several interviews today, reusability is a really, really important part of that. Imagine if every time you flew a plane from LA to New York, you threw it away at the end of the flight. That means essentially airline travel would be too expensive, costing hundreds of millions of dollars a flight, and almost no one would be able to fly. And so that's what SpaceX is trying to do here with reuse, allowing not just a handful of people to be able to go to space, but tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of regular folks like you and me to be able to go to space. So, myself, when people like me have a chance to go, I know my dream is to land on Jupiter's moon, Europa. Scientists believe that there is a liquid water ocean underneath the ice and that it has the potential to be habitable. And so I'm super excited to get up close and personal to maybe some space fish. Leland, what about you? Where would you go?
Wow, that's a pretty interesting destination. I think I would like to go to Mars. We've studied Mars so much and looked at it, and I think maybe having a Martian base that is dog friendly, bring the pups along, because I think as we explore, we want to take our families, our cultures, our traditions, with us, and flying with Doug and Bob is cool, but having more people,
There's the dogs.
The puppers, taking the puppers to space. I mean, they're not.
They look ready to go.
They are ready to go. We just needed maybe some like SpaceX type suits for them, But it's that's what it's all about, exploration. Like the settlers going the west, they took everything with them, and they started these new communities and these new traditions. And I think that's what we do with space travel. We start new traditions and communities and bring everyone together as one family, one civilization.
Absolutely. We're here for it. And knowing that the opportunity to fly to space as a private citizen is really just right around the corner, we have a new poll question on Twitter for you. If given the opportunity to fly to the moon, now we're talking the moon, would you fly to the South Pole where no one has ever been, or would you go to the Apollo 11 landing site? So those are going to be some interesting answers.
And while there is not a ton of cargo on today's mission, Dragon is carrying two very special payloads, aside from Bob and Doug, of course. The first of those payloads is a series of custom art pieces entitled Humankind by Los Angeles artist Tristan Eaton. These indestructible, double-sided paintings made from gold, brass, and aluminum celebrate how far humanity has come, as well as how far we still have to go. It includes a beautiful homage to the Saturn V rocket, as well as a nod to Bob and Doug's current ride to space. And you can find more images and information about these pieces on SpaceX's social channels. Next, in the spirit of inspiring the next generation of explorers, we wanted to celebrate the class of 2020, from kindergarten all the way to graduate school. So SpaceX and NASA invited students from around the world to submit their photo to fly on America's first human spaceflight in nearly a decade. Each graduate's photo was used to create a mosaic image of our beautiful planet Earth, which we printed, and it's now being flown aboard Bob and Doug's flight on the Crew Dragon spacecraft. We received nearly 100,000 photos. That's a ton, so thank you, and congratulations, graduates.
Yeah, I've got a couple of family members and friends who submitted their photos, so they're super excited about seeing their faces go to space in that beautiful mosaic. That was really cool.
And again, that's what it's all about, everyone coming together with their experiences and bringing them forward to space. And I think regular people flying to space. I mean, SpaceX is going to be flying, non-government people, non-military people, but people that have a desire to explore and do new things and traditions off planet, as we say sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, all this time since we've had the International Space Station, it's been government astronauts performing the research because you're the only ones we've been able to send, right? But
we've had some tourists, though. We've had people that paid their way on a Soyuz rocket.
Sure.
Go. But it's really the billionaire boys club. That's what Pharrell talks about with, it costs so much money to go to space, and I think that price point will come down as we make this more, more amenable for everyday people.
Absolutely.
And then eventually being able to fly artists and musicians and poets, people can tell the story of what they've seen out there in a way that really connects to the soul of people down on Earth, so they feel inspired to go.
Exactly.
Now, following today's mission, we will be one step closer to a future where we can all have that opportunity to gain the orbital perspective and explore new worlds. In just over an hour from now, Bob and Doug will be the first people to launch on an American vehicle in almost a decade. And for the SpaceX team, if I can try to speak for all of us, which is impossible, but I will say it has been an absolute honor to have the opportunity today to have this stage to show the world what we've poured our hearts into over the years with our partners at NASA. And it's just deeply humbling to know that the agency and that Bob and Doug have entrusted us with this critical mission. The responsibility that's on our shoulders is huge, and we're just so grateful to be here today.
Absolutely, and I know that our NASA teams really share in that sentiment. We heard from just a handful of them earlier when Bob and Doug were riding out to the launch pad, but there's so many people that we're probably never going to see or hear from on the public stage, but that have poured their hearts and souls, as you said, into this mission. All the engineers up late hours checking, double checking, triple checking everything to troubleshoot and solve problems and get us to this point. So it's just really awesome that we've made it to this point.
When you think about legacy, Katherine Johnson, who helped get John Glenn to space, her daughters are watching right now. And that legacy going forward to the future of space travel is powerful.
Wow.
And we heard from two icons of science and exploration on Wednesday, and we couldn't resist sharing these shout outs with you one more time.
Wow, we're making history again. The NASA program. I'm there with you guys in spirit. Bob, Doug, good luck. I know you'll be fine. I'll be watching and got everything crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at the Planetary Society, more rockets means more exploration. More people in space means more exploration. More countries involved in the endeavor of spaceflight means more exploration. This is how we know the cosmos and our place within it. So congratulations, SpaceX. Here's wishing your team, and the crew especially, a safe journey and the joy of discovery. Let's go.
So great to hear from William Shatner and Bill Nye, two very recognizable faces following along on the mission. And we want to go over to Dan and Jesse in Hawthorne, where we are now just 1 hour and 18 minutes from launch. Dan, Jesse?
Hey, thanks, Marie. Yeah, 1 hour, 18 minutes. I think we're tying ourselves in knots, just like Captain Kirk. We're really hoping the weather cooperates. In about 20 minutes or so, we might clear. So we're getting hopeful. We're getting our hopes up.
Yes. Very excited. Again, we're T-minus 1 hour and 18 minutes from launch, and the anticipation is real over here. Since arriving at the spacecraft, Bob and Doug were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air, pressurized nitrox, and a communications link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the Corps here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
And after all of those suit leak checks were successful, the closeout team was able to get out of the Dragon capsule and seal up that hatch, which also got its own leak check and was confirmed successful. At this point, the closeout team is out of the pad. They're away from the BDA, the blast danger area, and weather operators are about to kick off their final checks on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used during the final go, no go for launch. So we're all keeping eyes on the weather right now. Before we get to that final go, no go, all the various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do internal go polls, just making sure conditions are right with Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with the man over in Houston, Gary, for a status on the team supporting the space station for their readiness for launch.
Thanks, Dan. The team here in Mission Control Houston remains go for launch. We're also very hopeful about that weather. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for this mission are continuing to look good. Chris Cassidy is wrapping up his workday, and we'll be watching Bob and Doug launch here in just under an hour. So station power and communication systems are normal. Computers and networks used for monitoring Dragon's approach have been checked out, and the cabins and the station cabin's atmosphere and pressure are as expected and ready to welcome 2 new crew members aboard. Mission Control will be closely monitoring Bob and Doug's flight and checking off milestones for most of the flight, and this very same team will be coming back tomorrow to be ready when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin integrated operations and prepare for Dragon's docking. So I'll send it back. International Space Station team here is ready for launch. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thanks, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time. We're just a little over an hour to launch. And welcome to our coverage for the mission known as Demonstration Mission 2, or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 3:22 p.m. Eastern. Tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon. Everything good with the range so far. We're just really keeping an eye on that weather. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Bankin, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room. After that, they walked out of crew quarters, just as every astronaut to fly from space from this port has done since Apollo 7. And then they were transported over to the pad, where the crew members entered the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft that we're looking in live.
Today is a historic launch. It will be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with the retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 3:22 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station tomorrow morning.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between teams at SpaceX and NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test starting with this launch today, going on to dock with the space station tomorrow, and then splashing down at the end of their mission. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
We've been hearing a little bit from the crew on board Dragon, which you can see on your right screen. They are currently strapped into their seats and already through communications and leak checks. They're able to follow all the milestones still ahead on those display panels just above them, getting insight into all Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed towards launch. So at T-minus 1 hour and 13 minutes, let's check in with John I for a status update on the vehicles. What's the update, John?
Thanks, Jesse. Well, not much to add to what Dan and Jesse just brought up. We've had a smooth countdown this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no issues as the pace begins to pick up here in the last 70 minutes. On Falcon 9, we did get the team on console. Earlier, you heard the comm checks between the responsible engineers and the crew. The engineers will be making calls on Ascent for the crew's benefit, so they want to make sure that they could hear them before we go. The propulsion checkouts of the first and second stages are beginning right now. We're watching them begin to go through the process, opening valves. That check will go for about another 10 minutes, and that'll be our last one until propellant loading. Now the team will assess readiness for launch with a final go-no-go poll at T-minus 45 minutes, and that'll be followed by propellant loading starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now earlier today, Dragon operators also performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft is also currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, are currently inside Dragon. The hatch is closed. The SpaceX ground crew has left the tower. The next major event for Dragon is retract to the crew access arm that you can see currently alongside the capsule. That'll happen somewhere between T-minus 45 and T-minus 42 minutes. Now the range is currently clear for launch from historic Pad 39A. The worldwide network of ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. The weather, that's the one concern. We will get a weather brief at T-minus 1 hour, so just under 12 minutes from now. Currently, the ground and upper altitude winds are go, so that's one thing that we can check as green. At the current time, we did have some rain earlier that appears to have let up, but we are red on conditions for both the electric field at surface levels, lightning, and cumulus clouds. There is a expectation that a forecast that'll be coming up at about T-minus 1 hour also may give us clearance of those conditions. So everything is focusing now on the weather brief at T-minus 1 hours. Also, we should hope to hear about the final check on the ascent corridor. That's the weather along the Atlantic seaboard in case Dragon had to abort on the way to space. The conditions there have been marginal, but the expectation that it would be good for launch. But we will get all of that coming up here very shortly prior to entering propellant load. Now today we are aiming for a launch at 3:22:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or 19 hours, 22 minutes, 45 seconds Universal Time. Once we begin loading propellant, there's no opportunity to change T0. So once propellant is loading, we're committed, and we'll get one chance at it today. But currently at T-minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 30 seconds, everything except the weather is go for launch.
Thanks, John, for that detailed update. We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and just last year completed a test run of the mission. We're less than an hour from beginning here today.
The purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 1 was a really exciting moment,
Falcon
paved
9,
the way
Falcon
for
1
today's
starting.
mission to where we are today. And right now we're getting ready to fly U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time since 2011.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the Cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this new vehicle. It's fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but also features that full manual override capability just in case of emergency.
And many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from the very bottom of the trunk to the very top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon's comprised of two main elements. You have the capsule, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and then you have the trunk, which holds unpressurized cargo as well as having a solar array and radiator.
And the nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system as well as the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and that's unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability efforts.
Completely opposite the nose cone is that trunk. It has attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and it can hold cargo. On the very outside of the trunk, one half of it contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space. That's the white part, and that uses SpaceX's new picotiling technology. The other half contains the solar cells used to charge the spacecraft's batteries.
And though we only have 2 astronauts on board today, the spacecraft is actually designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and are custom sized for any crew member flying on board.
The control panel centered right between the pilot and the commander seats and has those 3 touchscreen displays that gives the crew insight into Dragon and even the ability to operate the vehicle and fly it manually.
And finally, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And as we look to the future beyond this test flight later this year, the first operational crewed mission for NASA will take place. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins.
Try to review your launch commit criteria and indicate readiness at the appropriate time. Step 5469 for propellant load and launch.
That's a good sign. That was the launch director. We're getting ready to pull the teams as we move towards that go, no go for propellant loading, which happens at about 45 minutes before launch. But back to our Crew 1 mission, NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Suichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission. Again, it's called Crew 1.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Excited?
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
You feel ready? Still pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo-2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Just the sensations, the rumbling, the shaking, the acceleration. My name is Doug Hurley, and I'm the spacecraft commander for the Demo-2 mission to the International Space Station. This will be the first time the Dragon had a crew on board, and so there's a myriad of objectives we want to achieve for this mission. What would work on orbit, what might not work on orbit, what would definitely work. To be able to just have the entire integrated team that's going to support us getting to and from space station, it was really neat being part of it. You know, we are the lucky ones that get to fly it, but we certainly not for 1 second take for granted the amount of effort that so many other people had to put into this to make it successful.
For Doug personally, he's worked so hard, I mean, through his entire life, to get to where we are right now. As a test pilot, this would be the dream to fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so happy to see that he gets to be part of this mission, the spacecraft commander. I'm just glad to see his hard work and his dream has come true for that.
It's been a long road in a lot of ways for not only us, but certainly for all the folks that work in the commercial crew program, as well as SpaceX in our case, just working to get to this point.
We're a little over 1 hour, 3.5 minutes away from launch. Now let's learn a little bit more about the man sitting next to Doug Hurley inside Dragon, NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000, went through the training program, primarily focused on the space shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing? Or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. Really, my role on the Dm-2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this, now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
If we look even further into the not-so-distant future, flying on a mission to space will be an option for more people as SpaceX plans to also fly private astronauts on board Dragon. Earlier this year, SpaceX signed an agreement with the space tourism company Space Adventures to fly up to 4 passengers on an orbital trip aboard Dragon as early as next year. And of course, it's NASA that is making private astronaut missions to the space station a possibility. We are looking forward to these missions, and we hope that you guys are all too.
All right, we are just 20 seconds away from T-minus 1 hour. This is going to be a really big moment that everyone's going to want to listen to. We're expecting a weather update, obviously hoping that the weather is improving, and so we should find out in the next 10 seconds or so. So we're going to stand by for a moment and wait for the Corps to give Bob and Doug a call, and then we'll all hear the
Dragon,
latest.
SpaceX, we're at T-minus 1 hour. You are go for Section 6. When ready, report go for launch.
Go? Não, sério?
We'll put it in work.
Go.
And that right there was a call for the crew to refer to some of their procedures. They do some final checks. You can see them checking harnesses, checking helmets, just making sure that they're strapped in and ready to go. And once they're done with that, the crew will report their readiness for launch.
SpaceX Dragon in 6.4. Bob and I are go for launch.
Copy, go for launch. And next up will be go to GoPro at T-minus 45.
Dragon copies.
All right, the crew is go for launch. So we are inside of 1 hour, still waiting for the weather update. But I mean, this day is one for the history books. We're returning crewed launches to station from American soil on American rockets. It's been almost 9 long years since we retired the space shuttle program. I remember that day. I'm going to remember this day. It's been a long road to get here, countless hours by thousands of dedicated professionals from NASA and SpaceX.
It's been an exciting week, but this last final hour is just so exciting right now. Today's mission will be Crew Dragon's second test flight and its first test with humans on board. It's been an awesome countdown so far. Weather, we're still waiting for that update, so it's still a watch item, but the crew is go for launch, so at T-minus 45 minutes, hopefully we'll get an update on that weather.
We've had a really clean countdown so far. It started with suit up just over 3 hours ago. The SpaceX team helping Bob and Doug put on their suits, conducting initial checkouts, including an initial pressure and leak check before they got to the actual walkout. And all of that done in that operations and checkout facility. The crew walkout was where Bob and Doug gave their final goodbyes to friends and family gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they began that roughly 20-minute ride to pad 39A. Really touching moment, saying goodbye to their family, both their wives and sons right in front of them.
Yeah, a very touching moment.
It's incredible to be able to watch these moments.
And as they got into their Teslas, we got to watch them ride all the way to the pad, and we got some great footage there. And as you can see on your screen, this is some playback from earlier of them getting into those Teslas, about to make that drive down to the pad. And once they got to the pad, they did take a minute to take in the sights, and they headed up the fixed service structure to begin the process called crew ingress, where Bob and Doug entered. And there you can see on your screen as they're coming through the crew access arm, entering the white room right before they are able to ingress into the vehicle there. Again, this was from earlier.
Yeah, this all from earlier, and as we said, that white room, the last place on planet Earth they're standing before they climb into Dragon for the ride uphill. SpaceX carrying over a tradition that NASA had that was traditionally the room from Gemini, Apollo, and the Space Shuttle, that last place. About 30 minutes ago, we're back with some live video here. The team was able to close Dragon's hatch with Bob and Doug safe inside. So we are under an hour ago. Things are going to pick up as we get close to that go, no go to begin propellant loading and then arming the launch escape system.
The crew pull for readiness was completed at T-minus 16 minutes, and the Dragon pull for prop load is coming up here in just about 30 seconds at T-minus 55 minutes. And then following that will be T-minus 45 minutes will be the internal mission control Hawthorne pull, and then the launch director's pull for propellant loading. When we get to about T-minus 40 minutes, the crew access arm will retract, and Bob and Doug will get the call to close their visors and arm the launch escape system. This is the automated system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And once we reach T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading for the Falcon 9 will begin. We got there on Wednesday. We got all the way down to about 17 minutes before launch before we had to cancel because of weather. But we're optimistic right now. Conditions have been improving, and so we're looking to press ahead once again into loading fuel onto that Falcon 9 rocket. Throughout the countdown, we've been getting some incredible views of the astronauts inside Dragon, just making all of their final preparations, some close-up views of their suits and on the displays as they just are strapped in and ready for launch. The teams often describe the suits as an extension of that Dragon spacecraft. You can always think of it as a mini spacecraft inside of a spacecraft. It's got all of the life support, everything that they need, just like the capsule.
The countdown 1 technical pull is complete. No constraints to proceed into launch escape system arming and propellant load.
And there's that call out that the crew is ready. They are ready to load prop onto Dragon. So we are pushing forward towards T0. And while those suits do look great, they are also engineered to connect directly into Dragon seats to provide communications, cooling, and the ability to pressurize if necessary.
All right, well, we did get the call out that the technical teams on the ground are ready for launch escape arming and propellant loading. Again, things starting to pick up, things really starting to feel real. Let's jump down real quick to the team at Kennedy, see if you guys are just as excited. I can't sit still right now. It's starting to feel real.
Yeah, it's hard to sit still in here, right, Leland?
Rocket fuel going through my veins still.
I know. It's so awesome when we see them sitting there in their suits. We're less than an hour away now. So far, things look like we might make it. We might make it. So I want to ask you what it was like the first time you put on a spacesuit when you knew you were going to space.
Oh, that was February of 2008. We were in the ONC building getting the pumpkin suits on. A little bit different than the SpaceX fly SpaceX suits, but it was kind of surreal, you know. And to think that all of these, it took 10 years of training to fly in space. It took me 10 years from when I got in the Corps in 1998 to flying in February of 2008. So it was a long road to get there, but it was so worth it and so sweet. And you know, learning how to use the green apple, the connections for oxygen, for cooling. Much different than these suits that we have here with SpaceX, and so it's a lot more complicated to go through that whole series of things that you have to do to make sure you're safe in the suit. But we've evolved, we're ready, and they look so cool and calm and collected in their suits and in the vehicle. They're focusing and getting ready to fly in space.
And there's so much excitement around the center. I know, Leland, you've been getting some messages. You got another message from another astronaut.
Yeah, Sunny Williams. Okay, so Sunny,
She's
Lauren,
kind of the best.
She's
awesome.
commercial crew also.
She was one of the original cadre. She was one of the original 4 who trained with Bob and Doug from the beginning of the commercial crew program.
And she's one of my classmates. Look at her there. What is she wearing?
There she is. Hey,
the
Sunny.
meatball.
I forgive you, Sunny.
No, she had the worm on Wednesday, so she wore the meatball today. So
She's the best.
But now she can wear the worm ball. I guess.
Yeah.
The worm ball. Yeah, she can mix it up. But yeah, Sunny's awesome. She's training to fly on the Boeing Starliner in the not too distant future. So really glad she's watching and showing some love. So thanks a lot, Sunny, for sending that note. And again, we're looking at a live view of the Crew Dragon on top of a Falcon 9 rocket. You can see the crew access arm to the right of your screen. That's the hallway that Bob and Doug walked down to get into the White Room, which is the last place we saw them standing up before they climbed inside Dragon. And again, the wider shot there of Launch Complex 39A, where we are inside of an hour from liftoff, and I think we're just a couple minutes away from the poll we're going to hear before they start propellant load.
50 minut, a 20 minut, 20 sekund.
Again, a 2-stage rocket there. And gosh, you guys, the weather looks not that bad. I mean, obviously that is not an official forecast, but it doesn't look quite as bad as it did Wednesday. We've got a little bit better odds. So there's the countdown clock. We're going to pause to listen to that comm.
Go, Albano, go. Albano, go. Go, Albano, go. Go, Albano, go.
If you're just joining us, we're less than 50 minutes from the scheduled liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying Crew Dragon. And if we start to hear any kind of update on weather or polling, we will pause to listen in for that. But if things go as scheduled, we should be hearing the launch director verify go for propellant load at about T-minus 45 minutes. So we're going to send it over to Hawthorne to carry the ball. John Instrucker or Jesse, are you there?
This weather is go at this time.
Go.
Dragon copy, go weather.
Yes! Yes!
And there you heard
Go
that call
for-
out. So far, we have good weather. We are go for launch today. This is getting really exciting. I don't know about you, Dan, but my heart is beating pretty fast right now.
Yeah, we've been waiting for those words since Wednesday,
Oh, yeah.
and we did
Yes!
hear a call to the crew just in case you
Yes!
missed it that they were
Go
only
for
tracking
it.
one final weather constraint. It was the cumulus cloud rule. They were expecting it to clear up within
Yes!
10 minutes, and it's cleared up now. So we are currently go on weather.
Yes, and it's been pretty incredible to be so close to launch, and the road leading up to this point has been pretty incredible as well.
It has been. It's been a partnership between NASA and SpaceX. We've been working together since since SpaceX started flying cargo to the International Space Station, now getting ready to launch crew. And we've been really fortunate to work with not only a lot of international partners on the International Space Station, but a lot of
And as
really
a
great
reminder,
companies.
here in the control room, we'll be closing doors here once we start with propellant load. Any last-minute bio breaks, please go ahead and accomplish those in the next few minutes.
And the launch director just getting the teams ready. We'll be coming up on that propellant loading again. That starts at about 35 minutes prior to liftoff, so in about 12 minutes from now. There's going to be a go, no go coming up really soon. So let's go over to our man, John I, for the latest. John?
T-minus 47 minutes, 24 seconds. We're continuing to count down. As you just heard, the launch director and launch team are preparing for the readiness for launch poll. Now, the launch director is currently checking with Dragon mission director, NASA launch manager for their readiness. And actually, it sounds like everybody is good there. The launch director will then ask the team, he'll tell them the poll is open, and the 13 members of the SpaceX launch team will be electrically polled for their go to load propellant, as well as continue all the way to launch. Now, we will hear that poll results and a briefing from the launch director at about T-minus 45 minutes. The good news right now is that the weather is go. All the conditions that were read shortly a while ago at T-minus 1 hour have cleared. We're, as the weather forecaster said, cautiously optimistic. Currently,
Countdown.
the probability...
Poll is complete. We're go for propellant load.
Well, we got an early call out there.
And launch control clear to retract the access arm on time. After that, arming access arm retract at T-minus 45 minutes.
Yes.
Got an early call from SpaceX launch director Mike Taylor that the poll is go. You also heard the direction T-minus 45 minutes to prepare for retract of the crew arm. As we hear more discussion, we'll stop and let you listen in. But right now, weather for liftoff, ground level winds are good, 10 to 15 miles an hour, well within limits. Upper altitude balloons show that conditions are acceptable. The red weather conditions have cleared up, the last one being cumulus clouds. And the probability of violation is set at 30% right now, so that's 70% chance of good weather. We're continuing to watch. There is about a less than 10% chance of lightning. We're also watching the abort corridor off of the Atlantic coast. In case, for example, at stage separation, Dragon had to abort into the ocean. The conditions there are acceptable. There has not been lightning lately. The weather, the winds are good. Light rain.
Kedy to było? Cicho. Cicho mi to puszka. Wow. Cicho.
A partnership between NASA and SpaceX. We've been working together. Loading again, that starts at about 35 minutes prior to liftoff, so in about 12 minutes from now. There's going to be a go, no go coming up really soon. So let's go over to our man, John I, for the latest. John?
T-minus 47 minutes, 24 seconds. We're continuing to count down. As you just heard, the launch director and launch team are preparing for the readiness for launch poll. Now, the launch director is currently checking with Dragon mission director, NASA launch manager for their readiness. And actually, it sounds like everybody is good there. The launch director will then ask the team, he'll tell them the poll is open, and the 13 members of the SpaceX launch team will be electrically polled for their go to load propellant, as well as continue all the way to launch. Now, we will hear that poll results and a briefing from the launch director at about T-minus 45 minutes. The good news right now is that the weather is go. All the conditions that were read shortly a while ago at T-minus 1 hour have cleared. We're, is the weather forecaster said cautiously optimistic. Currently,
Countdown.
the
Poll
probability.
is complete. We're go for propellant load.
Well, we got an early call out there.
Launch control clear to retract the access arm on time. After that, arming access arm retract at T-minus 45 minutes.
Yes.
Got an early call from SpaceX launch director Mike Taylor that the poll is go. You also heard the direction T-minus 45 minutes to prepare for time launch. Let's send it back over to Kennedy Space Center as the action begins to pick up on the pad. Right now,
Dragon and SpaceX, you are go for section 7, close visors, and arm launch escape system.
Well within limits. Upper altitude balloons show
We
the
will
conditions are
put
acceptable.
section 7 in work,
Weather
visors
conditions
coming
have
close.
cleared up, the last one being cumulus clouds. And the probability of violation is
All right, the
set at
countdown
30%
clock
right
is
now, so
continuing
that's
to
70%
tick. My
chance of
heart
good
is
weather.
continuing to
We're
beat
continuing to
5
watch.
million
There is
beats a
a
second,
less than 10%
and we
chance
are
of
getting
lightning.
so close.
We're also
At-
watching the
Dragon and
abort off of the
7.2,
Atlantic,
visors are closed.
coast.
We're arming launch
In
escape
case, for
system.
example, at stage separation, Dragon had
Copy.
to abort into the
As you
ocean.
just
The
heard,
conditions
the
there
crew
are
is arming
acceptable.
the
There has
launch
not been
escape
lightning
system.
lately.
That is
The
one of the
weather,
absolute
the winds are
last
good.
big
Light rain.
milestones prior to liftoff, other than nominal Falcon operations.
So just a minute ago, we saw the crew access arm retract, and obviously we just heard on the comms Bob and Doug getting ready to arm the launch escape system, and so that is something that protects them all the way to orbit. So when fueling starts at about T-minus 35 minutes, so just over 6 minutes from now, they will have the capability to abort, to separate from Falcon 9 either on the pad or even after liftoff. That's a critical safety capability.
Between NASA and SpaceX, we've been
And we are going to go over to Hawthorne now to take us through these next minutes. Jesse?
Section switching to nitrogen.
We did hear that call out that they are arming the launch escape system, so very exciting. SpaceX has designed Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 to be the safest launch system ever flown. So we brought back Nick Picone, SpaceX's Nick Picone, to talk more about this again. Thanks for coming back and joining us today, Nick.
Hey, Jesse. Happy to be here. Still monitoring the launch here with our recovery and ground operations teams.
Awesome. And Nick was our mission manager for our in-flight abort test earlier this year and now works on the Starlink team. Nick, on Wednesday, you talked about the launch escape system. Could you just give us a brief summary today for those that are joining today?
Sure. So the launch escape system, again, is our ultimate safety feature to keep Bob and Doug safe in the event of a major Falcon anomaly on the pad. The system is designed to automatically fire if either vehicle detects a dangerous condition developing. And if that happens, Dragon will use its 8 Super Draco engines to push the capsule off and away to a safe distance away from this Falcon. This capability is absolutely critical. It's what keeps the crew safe, and we're now active and armed on the pad with it protecting the crew.
And as you mentioned, the launch escape system allows the Dragon to separate and get away from the vehicle. I believe it goes into the ocean. What happens after it lands safely in the ocean?
Correct. So for most of our failure modes, the successful end state is Dragon deploying parachutes, splashing down safely in the ocean. But since a launch escape can happen while the vehicle's on the pad or anywhere in flight up through orbit, it could be splashing down right off the coast of Cape Canaveral. It could be splashing down thousands of miles away in the North Atlantic. If that happens, to make sure we can get to Bob and Doug as quickly as possible, the Space Force's 45th Space Wing, Task Force 45, has pararescue teams staged and ready all around the world, ready to drop in and rescue Bob and Doug as soon as possible.
And you mentioned that the launch escape system will keep them safe all the way up to orbit. What other options are there after Dragon is in orbit?
Sure. So if for any reason we're unable to dock to the International Space Station, we have several pre-planned return trajectories, which will bring the capsule down to a splashdown point close to shore, where NASA and SpaceX recovery forces will be waiting to recover them. It'll look like an otherwise totally normal recovery operation, except for the early end of mission. This operation is something we're doing with one of 2 identical crew recovery ships. We do that because The landing sites, we want to maintain as much flexibility as possible. There could be changing weather conditions that bring down one site and leave the other one up. So we have those 2 identical ships, one in the Atlantic, one in the Gulf of Mexico. And our space operations team can redirect the spacecraft to go to whichever site is the safest option for the crew at that time.
And with the vehicle, in almost any scenario, it sounds like the vehicle will land into the ocean. And it may look like a gentle landing into the ocean, but it's a pretty dynamic event happening. And you mentioned there are teams that are ready to go and rescue the vehicle and the astronauts on board. How do you prepare for something like that, especially with so many different scenarios that could happen?
Sure. So we're lucky to have had about a decade of recovery experience with Cargo Dragon 1 in our previous trips to the International Space Station. That, along with our booster recovery missions, we've got a great team of recovery operators here who have a lot of offshore experience with our spacecraft. The system, though, we took that experience, we built up a new crew recovery ship, 2 identical crew recovery ships, I should say, which have a lot of those lessons learned baked into the design of that ship and the operations. These new ships have complete medical facilities, an operational helipad, and redundant communications, power, and propulsion to make sure they're robust and ready for anything we encounter offshore. We've also done tons of training exercises with the SpaceX team, the NASA team, and the rescue forces I mentioned earlier, practicing capsule recovery, emergency scenarios where we have to get the crew out of the capsule while they're still in the water, as well as those helicopter evacuations, taking off and landing from the pad many times so that we make sure the team is ready to do that. They're all staged and ready. They feel ready to support, and will be ready to call on us if anything goes wrong today.
Awesome. It sounds like Bob and Doug are in some really good hands and will be safe no matter what occurs on the vehicle. So thank you, Nick, for joining us again, for walking us through all of those details. I hope you're just as excited as we are for a launch coming up here very, very shortly now. So we're going to send it over to KSC to Lauren.
Thank you, Jesse. So as you just heard, fueling is about to begin at T-minus 35 minutes. We are about 50 seconds away from that. And so we're getting really, really close to the first launch of astronauts into orbit from American soil since 2011. The launch escape system is armed, which, as you know, happens before fueling. And Dragon propellant load, that's the propellants that are inside of the Dragon capsule, not the rocket. Prop load for Dragon took place weeks ago and just a few miles down the road in what we call Dragonland. And those propellants, they are MMH, or monomethyl hydrazine, which is the fuel that we use. It's hypergolic fuel. And NTO, or nitrogen tetraoxide, that's the oxidizer. Those two come together and they ignite in space to propel the vehicle. You don't need that TTEB or a third thing to ignite because hypergolic propellants don't require it. You just need the fuel and the oxidizer. And as you just heard, propellant load has started on Falcon 9, and that's awesome. All right, so that bipropellant system feeds all of the engines on Dragon. So Dragon has 12 service section engines in each, so there's 3 in each quad, 3, 3, 3, and 3. Those are used for on-orbit maneuvering for Dragon. There's also 4 additional Dracos that are underneath the nose cone for large Delta V maneuvers that the vehicle will perform. But the engines that Nick Pacone was talking about earlier are Super Draco engines. We have 2 in each quad of the vehicle, so 8 total. And those are bigger engines with a high flow propellant system, and those are what lift Dragon off of Falcon 9 in the unlikely event of emergency that requires us to get off of Dragon, off of Falcon. Now, you probably remember, let's see, Mercury, Apollo, Soyuz, they have that big pointy tower on top. That's the launch escape system for those vehicles. It's actually just another rocket on top of the spaceship that lifts the vehicle off. In the case of Dragon, our escape system is integrated into the vehicle completely. And so that's just better from one less thing you have to jettison every single flight. But it also allows us to have escape capability from the pad before T0 all the way through to orbit. And so even if the very last minute, if we needed to get off of stage 2 while we're in space, we could actually escape to orbit. So yeah, that's the escape system for for a little baby dragon here.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks for walking us through that, because I think it's really important that people understand that critical safety capability, and that's the whole point when we hear that launch escape system is armed. What that means is that in an instant they can separate from Falcon 9, shoot up into the air, and they can splash down safely in the Atlantic Ocean under Dragon's parachutes, and it was designed to do that. So now that fueling is underway, it's been going on for about 2 minutes now, so they have that safety capability ready to go on standby in an instant if they need it. And so we want to go over to Hawthorne now for an operational update from John Innsbrucker. John?
Fuel and stage 2 fuel, all flow rates tracking nominally.
We're at T-minus 32 minutes, counting down. These final minutes, everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time launch. Falcon 9 did begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes at planned. Now on the Falcon 9, we use a fuel and oxidizer as the propellants that power it. The fuel is commonly known as RP1. That's rocket propellant grade 1 kerosene. The oxidizer is densified liquid oxygen, also called LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles. This allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now with the fuel and oxidizer on hand, we need an ignition source to complete that fire triangle, as we call it. For this, Falcon 9 uses a fluid called T-Teb. It ignites in the presence of oxygen and gives off a green-colored flame. Now it's hard to see on the first stage ignition due to the water that will be spraying on the pad, but you might just see the green flare as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation over 2.5 minutes into flight. Now currently first stage fuel tank is about 10% full. The first stage, as a reminder, as you look on the left side of your screens, the first stage is the long white cylinder at the bottom, topped off by the black cylinder. So over 2/3 of the rocket is that first stage. So the fuel tank is getting loaded. We're also loading the liquid oxygen into the first stage also. The second stage, which is the top 1/3 between the Dragon and the black cylinder, that's the white second stage, that is being loaded with fuel right now. That's about 8% loaded at this moment. Liquid oxygen loading is going to begin on second stage at T-minus 16 minutes 30 seconds. Liquid oxygen loading will continue on both stages all the way down to the last few minutes of the count. We're also loading helium into pressure vessels on the stages. That's used to pressurize tanks in flight as the propellant is pulled out by the strong Merlin turbopumps. On board the Dragon spacecraft, astronauts are monitoring systems while the propellant is loaded into Falcon 9. While we mentioned we had trained them with sounds that we had recorded on board. They've been through most of a propellant load, and they are now experiencing those sounds and vibrations.
Stage 1,
the
grab
range
helium load
continues to
started.
report no problems. They are go to support launch. Weather, the last of the red conditions cleared up about 15 minutes ago. Everything is marginal but acceptable on the weather. We'll continue to watch all the way through the countdown. Now, as a reminder, today we are now into an instantaneous launch window now that we've begun propellant loading. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity tomorrow, May 31st.
Thanks, John. For Demo 2, Bob and Doug's flight to station will take about 19 hours, and their journey is fairly similar to the trip our Cargo Dragon makes back and forth to the International Space Station, but with two noticeable differences, and that's docking and splashdown.
And as we await T-minus 0, in just under 29 minutes from now, the ground operations teams are doing a series of system checks to make sure Dragon and Falcon 9 are both ready for liftoff. And we're continuing to get live views inside the capsule with Bob and Doug, and you're now also looking in firing room 4 down there at the Cape.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon make their ascent until the Falcon 9 first and second stage separates and sends Dragon on its way to.
And at this point, mission operator.
Tak to widzisz. Launch bla bla bla, zacznijmy. Ok. Mamy mission control. To nie. Jest. Start now. Czekajcie. Odpowiednio connecting. Rebooting.
Stage 2 cryo-heme loader started.
Blah blah blah, practice. Teraz musimy gdzieś to background. To inglez. Это просто super. Tylko otworzyć. Mamy to. Start down. The book. To nie widać, że ona dobra. Teraz wytrynało. Właśnie. Stay. Ok. Podawanie przyciążone. Gdy nie ma to zbytno. Budzie. Dobrze. Tak, Also, no screen. Protože jsem dragoně. Páčině. Oh, no, to se. Mě to jedno. Make them. No, change. No, hej, to ty back.
Strong back chill started. Stage 2 RP1 load is complete.
Is this someone separate boy? No. Takže vyzerá to tak, že vyzerá to tak, že second.
Dragon to SpaceX. Go for launch.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 profit nominal. Stage 1 entry startup. Stage 1 is transit.